Hey, what's up, guys? Little man with a big opinion here. So, I've got my coffee for today. Let's actually shut the door a little bit more. I've got my coffee. We've got a nice breeze for today. Looking at the news over this last week, and actually, paying attention, I would say, for the better part of 4 or 5 years. Let's rewind for a second. I don't have enough caffeine in me yet. Prepping is a non-political issue, I think. Being, doing the prepping stuff, the camping, trying to be prepared for, when SHTF happens. I've always liked to think of myself as Mel Gibson's character from The Patriot. And it takes one of his kids dying before he's like, all right, the gloves are off, let's get started in this thing. And I still hold that belief. I don't want the channel to get, political. I think putting food aside, having some way to have clean drinking water, shelter, all of that kind of stuff, I think it is, apolitical. Everyone should be doing it. That's my opinion on that. But a big part of the prepping stuff is, the idea of firearms and the idea of, taking care of yourself and your family. And I definitely think that is getting harder. And, it's, how should I put this? It's one of those things where, I think prepping should be, a lifestyle. It's not something that you do, on the weekends. It's not something that, you pay a monthly fee for it, and, that's going to make everything better. Prepping should be, what can I do each and every day to increase my chances of survival? I don't know if y'all can hear the high school band practicing, but they're about a block and a half away. That's kind of why I've started doing the shorts, is to kind of show what happens every day. And there are some days where the only thing that happens is I work out. I read a little bit of a book. I watch video on YouTube. There are other days where, other hobbies that I think fall into, prepping, more goes into that. Like I've been cleaning reloading dies for like a week now. Trying to get all of the rust and crud and junk off of them. Some of them I think they're going to be just fine. And a couple of pieces I'm looking at it going, I think the only saving grace is that's for a 243, and I don't own a 243. That's one of them. It's really bad. But with all this, prepping stuff, part of what I'm also doing with this channel is paying attention to the news. You know, it can be a very simple. Like, my city has had 4 boil water notices in the last 3 weeks. That's something that's important because 2 of them affected me. Now, I was also hyper vigilant and looking for them because, 2 city hall meetings ago or city council meetings ago, they mentioned, they're going to be doing a lot of repair on the infrastructure. Look out for these things. And some of that is easy. I get a text message saying, hey, city's under boil water notice, this street to this street. That's something that affects every single person. Depending on how that goes, you might not even notice it. It's a couple hours long. I've evacuated for 3 or 4 hurricanes. I've stayed where I was for 2 hurricanes because I wasn't, that worried about, some of it might be being young and naive. But one of them, I went through the whole thing, and it was probably a good thing I stayed because I was in the city. And I was one of the only people that had a chainsaw that could go help other people out with, down trees. So that political stuff, it's easy to talk about that stuff. But where it gets rougher is, I think prepping should be a lifestyle, but I also think you should plan on living out your life, not being afraid of anything. Prepping's a big part of it, but like my family, we went to Disney this last summer, had an amazing time. That was our vacation. This next summer, we're planning on driving up to Oregon, seeing her folks, but also, might stop in Vegas, might stop at the Grand Canyon. There's a lot of stuff that we want to see and do that has absolutely nothing to do with prepping. And if I was a terrible person, I'd say no, we're going to take that, $5,000 or whatever and put it into, something prepping. But there's a sweet balance between all of this. There's I'm still putting money in a health savings account and a college account and, a stock portfolio. Boring stuff that, other people might find it entertaining to watch, but they probably won't find it entertaining to see like $75 go into an account each month because, number not big, so not interesting. But it's all the other stuff. They say we're in civil strife right now. I've seen comparisons of, the Charlie Kirk death to that of, MLK. And on some lines, I can agree with that. I think I more agree with it than disagree with it. The backlash against other people that talk about this. I do think there's a level of fear out there amongst other right-leaning commentators left-leaning commentators. I think it's against, basically anyone that has an opinion that can then have a group of people disagree with that opinion. It doesn't even have to be a big group. Like, you could be in the majority 98%. And out of that 2% of people, there's someone in there going, I need to take this guy out. So, making the channel political in any way, it kind of puts a target on my back. If I came out and mentioned my stance on abortion, whether I agree with it or disagree with it, that's going to immediately either get me more followers, less followers, death threats, or people praising my opinion. I already mentioned in a different video my voting pattern. I think other Hispanic males might be upset, but I'm not going to completely disagree with what's currently going on. I think things can be done a little better. But I don't see much of a alternative, and I think that's also why I'm a prepper. I don't think we're gonna have this grandiose civil war. I think if some type of conflict like that broke out, it would lead to the balkanization of the U.S. I think parts of it would be taken over by other countries. Like, I think Alaska would go back to Russia. If there was infighting in the continental U.S., Russia's coming into Alaska. Hawaii might go back to being its own country. The guy in charge of the military in Pearl Harbor, he's like, hey, we're hanging out here. And that would be a very devastating blow. People probably wouldn't mess with Hawaii for a very long time. Kind of leads me into, my coffee. No, it's not a sponsor. I don't think I'll have a YouTube channel big enough to come up with my own coffee that, in my opinion, tastes like everyone else's coffee. They're not reinventing the wheel. I've had the Timcast coffee, I've had the Quartering coffee, I've had the Mug Club coffee, I've had the Black Rifle coffee, I've had Walmart coffee, I've had coffee from Europe. Coffee from Europe did taste different because they put orange in it, and I didn't like the way it tasted. A medium roast is a medium roast is a medium roast. A light roast is a light roast is a light roast. The dark roast, you can get a little bit stronger bitter if they're roasting it longer. It just comes down to, who do you want to make a little bit of money? Who do you want to support? But stock up on your coffee because your caffeine is important. It doesn't matter your politics or what you think about any of this. Stock up on your caffeine. Let me know your thoughts down below. Should we go political with this channel? Should we try to stay bipartisan? Should we kind of get more into culture? Should I stick more with camping, prepping, shooting guns? Let me know your thoughts down below. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.